She had been coming to the small music room for years, always at the same time, always with the same quiet walk. The room smelled of old wood and polished keys, and the piano sat near the window where sunlight touched only half of it. Every week, she sat on the bench, adjusted it carefully, and placed her hands on the keys like she had been taught. Nothing about her stood out at first glance. She was simply another student, one of many who came and went, learning notes, counting beats, and trying not to make mistakes. Her lessons were simple. Scales, short pieces, and exercises that most students learned early. She followed instructions well. She listened, nodded, and practiced exactly what was written on the page. Her teacher often described her as steady and polite. Not slow but not special either. She did not rush ahead, and she did not fall behind. She existed in the middle where many students stay for years without much change. At home, the piano was older and slightly out of tune. Some keys were louder than others, and a few made soft clicking sounds when pressed. Still, she practiced every evening. Not because anyone forced her, but because it felt like part of her day, like eating dinner or washing her hands. Her family listened from other rooms, sometimes noticing the music, sometimes not. To them, it sounded fine. Nothing more. She never talked much during lessons. When asked how practice was going, she answered with short sentences. When corrected, she accepted it without question. She did not argue or explain. She did not ask for harder pieces or extra time. She simply did what was required and moved on. Other students sometimes complained or showed off. She did neither. There were moments when her teacher watched her closely, trying to see if something was missing or hidden. But each time the answer seemed clear. She was learning at a normal pace. Her hands were small but careful. Her timing was correct. Her sound was clean but plain. Nothing wrong, nothing surprising. Outside the music room, her life was quiet too. School, homework, chores, and practice filled her days. She was not the loud one in class or the center of attention among friends. She listened more than she spoke. When others talked about big dreams, she stayed silent. Not because she had none, but because she did not know how to explain them. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, she returned to the piano. She played softer then, so no one would wake up. These moments were not planned. She did not open a book or follow a lesson. She just sat down and let her fingers move. The sounds were different at night. Slower, deeper, and filled with feeling. But these moments stayed private. No one else heard them. In class, the focus remained on basics. Her teacher reminded her to keep her wrists straight, to count carefully, to follow the notes exactly as written. She did all of it. If there was ever emotion in her playing, it stayed hidden behind correct timing and proper posture. It was as if she was protecting something, even if she did not fully understand what that something was. As weeks passed, a small recital was announced. Nothing big, just a short event where students would play for a few parents and classmates. The piece chosen for her was simple, one she had played many times before. When she looked at the sheet, she felt calm. There was nothing difficult there. No fast runs, no complex parts. Just a clean, easy melody. Her teacher was satisfied. This piece matched her level perfectly. It would show that she could play correctly without mistakes. That was enough. No one expected more. At home, she practiced the piece again and again. Her family heard it so often that it blended into the background of daily life. Sometimes she stopped in the middle, not because she forgot the notes, but because she felt something was missing. She played it again, trying to understand that feeling. But each time, she returned to the written notes, afraid to go beyond them. She did not see herself as talented. To her, talent was something loud and obvious, something people praised and talked about. She had never been described that way. She was simply reliable, and in many ways she was fine with that. The day of the recital arrived quietly. Chairs were arranged, the piano was cleaned, and a small audience gathered. Parents whispered to each other. Students waited their turn. She sat among them, holding her music sheets, her heart beating a little faster than usual. When it was almost her turn, she watched others play. Some made mistakes and laughed. Some rushed through their pieces. A few looked nervous and shaky. She noticed these things but did not judge. She simply waited. Her name was called and she walked to the piano. She adjusted the bench the same way she always did. She placed the music in front of her, took a breath, and rested her hands on the keys. From the outside, it looked like another normal moment. Another student. Another simple piece. No one in the room expected anything beyond that. And she didn't either. At least not yet. After the recital announcement, life returned to its usual rhythm. But something inside her felt slightly different. She could not explain it clearly, even to herself. On the surface, nothing had changed. She still went to school, finished her homework, and attended piano lessons on the same days. Yet, every time she touched the keys, she felt a quiet pull, as if the piano was asking more from her than before. During lessons, she continued playing exactly what was written. Her teacher corrected small mistakes, praised her focus, and moved on. Other students talked about feeling nervous for the recital or wanting to impress their parents. She listened but stayed quiet. Deep inside, her thoughts were not about the audience. They were about sound. About how a single note could feel empty or full depending on how it was played. At home, her practice slowly changed. She still began with scales and the assigned piece, but she no longer stopped when the timer ended. Some evenings, after everyone else went to bed, she returned to the piano again. The house was silent, and the darkness made the room feel smaller. She played softly, not caring about mistakes. These were not real performances. They were conversations between her and the instrument. She started pressing keys differently, holding some notes longer, letting others fade quickly. Sometimes she repeated one small part again and again, trying to shape it into something that felt right. She was not following rules then. She was listening to how the sound filled the room and how it made her feel. She never told anyone about this. Not her family, not her teacher, not her friends. It felt personal, like a secret diary written in sound instead of words. She worried that if someone heard her, they would tell her to stop, to follow the sheet music, to not make things complicated. At school, she often found herself tapping rhythms on her desk or humming melodies under her breath. She did not even notice she was doing it until someone asked her to stop. Music followed her quietly through the day, like a shadow that never left. Her teacher once asked if she wanted to try a harder piece. The question surprised her. She hesitated before answering. Harder did not mean better to her. She was not sure how to explain that, so she simply said she was fine with the current level. The teacher nodded and respected her choice, thinking she preferred to move slowly. In truth, she was afraid. Afraid that moving forward would pull attention toward her. Afraid that someone might notice the way she truly connected with music. Staying average felt safe. It allowed her to keep her secret moments untouched. As the recital grew closer, practice at the music school became more frequent. Students rehearsed in front of each other, correcting mistakes and offering nervous smiles. When it was her turn, she played the simple piece cleanly, exactly as written. No extra notes. No emotion on the surface. Just accuracy. Her teacher seemed pleased. That was all that was expected. Nothing more. At home, though, the same piece sounded different. When she played it alone, she felt the urge to slow down in certain places, to let the melody breathe. Sometimes her fingers moved on their own, adding gentle changes without thinking. When she realized what she was doing, she quickly stopped and went back to the original version. She did not yet trust herself. Her family noticed that she spent more time at the piano, but they assumed it was normal because of the recital. They praised her dedication and told her she was doing well. Their words were kind but simple. No one asked how the music made her feel. One evening, she stayed at the piano longer than usual. She played until her fingers felt tired. Instead of stopping, she rested her hands and looked at the keys. They seemed ordinary, black and white, nothing special. Yet they held endless sounds within them. That thought stayed with her. She wondered why some people could say so much without words, while others struggled even when they tried. Music felt easier to her than speaking. It did not ask questions. It did not judge. It only responded. As the recital day came closer, a quiet tension grew inside her. Not fear, but something like pressure. A feeling that something important was waiting, though she did not know what it was yet. She continued playing the simple piece the way she was expected to during lessons. But every night, alone in the quiet house, the music grew deeper, richer, more honest. She was still the same student everyone saw. Quiet, average, reliable. But inside, something was slowly waking up. She just didn't know when it would finally come out. The day of the recital arrived without drama. The sky looked ordinary, and the morning felt like any other. She ate breakfast quietly, packed her bag, and went through her routine as if nothing important was about to happen. But inside her chest, something felt tight. Not fear exactly, more like a feeling that something was about to shift. At school, she could not focus fully. Numbers and words blurred together as her thoughts drifted back to the piano. She kept hearing the melody in her head, the simple piece she was supposed to play. Over and over again, it repeated, calm and predictable. Yet beneath it, she sensed other sounds waiting, like voices behind a closed door. When the final bell rang, she went straight home. Her family reminded her not to be nervous and told her to do her best. She nodded, smiled lightly, and went to change. She did not sit at the piano before leaving. For once, she wanted silence. The recital hall was small and familiar. Rows of chairs filled the room, some already taken by parents and relatives. The piano stood at the front, polished and bright under the lights. It looked different there, more serious than the one at home. She took a seat with the other students and waited. One by one, they were called up. Some played quickly, eager to finish. Others paused too often, their nerves showing in shaking hands. The audience clapped kindly for everyone. As she waited, her palms grew warm. She pressed them together, then rested them on her knees. She listened carefully, not to judge, but to feel the space. The sound of the piano traveled differently in this room. It echoed slightly, holding on to notes longer than she expected. When her turn was called, she stood up calmly. Her legs felt steady as she walked to the front. She adjusted the bench just like always. She placed the music on the stand, though she barely needed it. She took a breath and lowered her hands to the keys. The first notes came out clean and soft, exactly as practiced. The melody moved forward gently, and her fingers followed without effort. Her mind felt quiet. For a moment, everything was under control. Then something happened. It was small at first. A pause that lasted just a bit longer than written. A note held slightly deeper. She did not plan it. Felt natural, like breathing out after holding air too long. Her fingers responded before her thoughts did. She felt a sudden warmth spread through her hands. The piano no longer felt like an object. Felt like a voice. The room around her faded, and she became aware only of sound and motion. Another small change followed. Then another. The melody stayed the same, but the feeling shifted. The music began to tell a story instead of simply repeating notes. She leaned into the keys, shaping the sound gently, carefully. In the audience, a few people leaned forward without realizing it. The usual sounds of shuffling and whispering faded away. Something about the way she played caught their attention. She was no longer reading the sheet. Her eyes rested on the keys, then slowly closed. She trusted her hands. They moved with confidence she did not know she had. The simple piece began to grow. Not louder but fuller. Every note felt intentional. The spaces between sounds mattered just as much as the sounds themselves. Her teacher noticed first. Sitting near the front, they frowned slightly, unsure of what they were hearing. This was not how the piece was taught. Yet it was not wrong. It was careful, controlled, and deeply expressive. The student at the piano felt her heart racing, but not with fear. It was excitement mixed with relief. She was finally playing the way she felt, not the way she was expected to. For a brief moment, doubt flashed through her mind. Should she stop? Should she return to the written notes? But her hands did not slow down. The music continued, flowing freely. She added gentle changes, subtle shifts that transformed the piece into something new. It was no longer just a practice song. It was alive. The audience remained silent. No one moved. No one coughed or whispered. They listened. When the final note faded, it hung in the air longer than expected. She kept her hands on the keys, breathing softly. For a second, the room stayed frozen. Then applause filled the space. It was louder than she expected. Startled, she opened her eyes. People were clapping, some smiling, some looking confused but impressed. She stood up slowly and bowed, her face warm with emotion. She returned to her seat, her heart still racing. Her hands trembled slightly, and she pressed them together, trying to calm herself. Her teacher looked at her with a new expression. Not anger, not disappointment, but surprise. She did not know what would come next. She only knew that something important had just happened. The secret she had protected for so long was no longer hers alone. And there was no going back. The applause faded slowly, but the feeling in the room stayed. People shifted in their seats, whispering softly, trying to understand what they had just heard. It was not loud or dramatic, yet it lingered in everyone's mind. She sat still, her hands resting on her lap, her heart beating hard against her chest. She avoided looking around at first. Part of her wanted to disappear, to blend back into the chair like nothing unusual had happened. Another part felt strangely calm, as if she had finally said something important after staying silent for too long. When the recital ended, people stood and began talking more openly. Parents smiled at their children, offering praise and gentle encouragement. A few glanced in her direction more than once. She noticed it but pretended not to. Her teacher approached her quietly. There was a pause before speaking, long enough to make her nervous. She waited, unsure whether to apologize or explain. That moment never came. Instead, her teacher spoke calmly, asking how long she had been playing like that. The question surprised her. She answered honestly, saying she wasn't sure. It had never felt like something she was doing. It was simply how the music came out when she stopped thinking. The teacher listened closely, nodding slowly. There was no anger in their face, only curiosity. They said the piece had changed, but in a way that showed understanding, not disrespect. Hearing those words eased the tight feeling in her chest. Other teachers nearby joined the conversation. They spoke quietly, careful not to make her uncomfortable. Some asked questions. Others simply observed her, as if seeing her for the first time. She felt exposed but also relieved. For so long, she had kept that side of herself hidden. Now that it was visible, she was not sure how to carry it. On the way home, her family was unusually quiet. Finally, someone spoke, saying they had never heard her play like that before. Their voice held surprise, but also pride. She smiled softly and looked out the window, watching the lights pass by. At home, she sat alone for a while. The piano waited in the corner of the room. She did not rush toward it. Instead, she thought about the moment on stage, about how natural it had felt, about how afraid she had been to let it happen. The next lesson felt different. When she entered the room, her teacher greeted her with a new tone. Not excitement but respect. They asked her to play the same piece again. She hesitated. This time there was no audience, no applause, just the piano and the quiet room. She placed her hands on the keys and began. The music flowed gently, but something was missing. The pressure of being watched made her careful again. She stopped and apologized. Her teacher shook their head and told her there was nothing to be sorry about. They encouraged her to try again, not to copy what she had done before, but to feel it. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Slowly, the tension eased. The music returned, softer this time, but honest. Her teacher listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was another pause. Then her teacher spoke about instinct, about how some people understand music beyond technique. They explained that this kind of connection could not be forced or taught easily. It had to be protected. Hearing that made her emotional. For years, she had believed that staying quiet and average was the right choice. Now, she was being told that her difference mattered. Still, doubt remained. She worried that expectations would change. that people would now want more from her than she could give, that the freedom she felt at the piano would disappear under pressure. Her teacher sensed this and reassured her. There would be no rush, no demands, just guidance. Over the following weeks, lessons slowly shifted. She was given space to explore, to improvise gently, to understand why certain sounds moved her. She also continued learning technique, but it no longer felt like a cage. Felt like support. Outside of lessons, her confidence grew quietly. She spoke a little more. She listened differently. Music no longer felt like a secret she had to protect. It became a part of her that she could share carefully. People at school began to mention the recital. Some asked her to play for them. She declined politely most of the time. She was still learning how to exist in this new space. At night, when the house was quiet, she returned to the piano as she always had. But now she played without fear. The music filled the room naturally, carrying all the feelings she could not explain with words. She did not know where this path would lead. She only knew she could no longer pretend to be someone she wasn't. The simple student everyone once saw was still there. But now so was the musician. Time moved forward in small, steady steps. There was no sudden change in her life, no dramatic moment where everything became clear. Instead, each day added something new, like a quiet note joining a growing melody. Her lessons continued, but they no longer felt like a test she had to pass. They felt like conversations. Sometimes she followed written music, sometimes she was asked to play freely. There were days when nothing worked, when the sound felt flat and her fingers felt heavy. On those days, she learned patience. She learned that feeling deeply did not mean playing perfectly every time. She also learned that doubt did not disappear just because others believed in her. Some mornings, she woke up wondering if the recital moment had been a mistake, if she had imagined the reaction, if the music she felt inside would fade now that it had been seen. But each time she sat at the piano, the answer came quietly. The sound was still there, waiting. Her teacher encouraged her to listen more than play, to notice how music existed everywhere, not just on the keys. The rhythm of footsteps, the rise and fall of voices, the silence between moments. Slowly, she began to understand that music was not something separate from life. It was part of it. At home, her family adjusted without making a big deal out of it. They listened when she played, sometimes sitting nearby, sometimes going about their day. They did not ask her to perform. That simple respect meant more to her than praise ever could. She still played late at night. Those moments remained her favorite. The house quiet, the lights dim, the piano responding softly. She played not to improve, not to impress, but to feel honest. One evening, she stopped in the middle of a piece and laughed quietly to herself. She realized she was no longer afraid of where the music might go. That fear had slowly loosened its grip. The school life stayed mostly the same. She was still quiet, still thoughtful. A few people knew about the recital and treated her differently, but she did not let it change her. She did not feel the need to explain herself anymore. There came a day when she was asked to play again at a small gathering. This time she agreed. Not because she felt ready, but because she understood that sharing did not mean losing something. She chose a simple piece much like before. She played it gently, letting it grow naturally. There was no pressure, no moment of shock. Just music, steady and sincere. The response was warm, but calm. And that felt right. Afterward, she thought about how different this moment felt compared to the first recital. Back then, everything had spilled out at once. Now she was choosing when and how to let it flow. She began to understand that her talent was not a single moment. It was a way of listening, a way of feeling, something that would change and grow with her. There were still days when she played only what was written, days when she needed structure, and that was okay. Freedom, she learned, did not mean ignoring boundaries. It meant understanding them. As seasons changed, she continued walking the same paths, living the same life on the outside. But inside, there was movement, quiet, steady growth. She no longer thought of herself as average. Not because she felt better than others, but because she understood that being unseen did not mean being empty. One night, as she finished playing and let the final note fade, she rested her hands in her lap and sat still. She felt calm. She did not know where music would take her in the future, whether it would become a career, a lifelong companion, or something that changed form over time. What she knew was this: she had learned to trust herself. The piano was no longer a place to hide. It was a place to be honest. And that, she realized, was the real masterpiece.